Hello and welcome to your Access Point to Washington. I'm Ayesha Tanzeem. An 11-year-old Christian girl with Down syndrome has allegedly burned pages of a children's book which might have contained verses of the Quran. And police had to take her in custody to save her from an angry mob. While on the other side of the globe, Muslims in Staten Island complained that pieces of bacon were spread on the grounds where they were going to offer their Eid prayers. Is religious tolerance a distant dream even in the 21st century?
Our religion has been termed as an evil religion.
I think the American people immediately recoil against those kinds of attitudes.
KKK! The Quran has been equated to Hitler's Mein Kampf.
Radical Muslims are the people that are committing these crimes. And I am a Muslim.
And a Muslim.
It's hurtful when we have our own people, spurring this hate against us.
Because all they see around them, all they feel around them is hate and insecurity.
Country, regardless of what we look like, where we come from, who we worship, we are all one people.
Welcome to the VOA studios in Washington. Joining me today to talk about religious intolerance in the 21st century is Munia Jabbar of Council on American Islamic Relations, Joëlle Fiss of Human Rights First, and a very prominent lawyer and human rights activist from Pakistan joining us from our London studios, Asma Jahangir. Welcome to each of you. Now, Ms. Jahangir, I want to start with you. You've spent a lifetime working on human rights in Pakistan. We just talked about the case of a young Christian child being alleged and accused of blasphemy and burning pages of the Quran. This is not an isolated incident, is it?
No, unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. There have been earlier incidents where children have been accused of blasphemy. People who have mentally challenged have been accused of blasphemy, where very old people have been accused of blasphemy. And I think it is about time that we not only get the perpetrators to stand for justice, but there has to be a kind of narration and message in Pakistan which politicians have to give. And this is not a question of left or right. Nobody will stand for that kind of barbarism. It is the kind of barbarism at the eve of Eid where I think no God-fearing person could celebrate Eid. And I hope that at the next Eid, when they are sacrificing a goat, they will sacrifice the beast within.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jahangir. Now, Ms. Fiss, your group, Human Rights First, is one of the groups that raised this concern about this young Christian girl. We have received a lot of comments ever since we announced the topic, and those comments include almost an allegation against human rights groups like yours and even media like us. I will read out a couple of comments and I want you to answer those. So this is a comment from Mani Malik left on our Facebook page. He says that, I think all the rules, either regarding human rights or else, are made for Muslims, or you can say Pakistanis in some way, and Western media only highlights us, not themselves. Another comment left by Mr. Amjad Khan: there is so much violence in India in the name of caste, violence in Kashmir, also in Russia where there's so much inhuman activity, but they're not highlighted. Why? So the allegation is groups like yours only highlight it when Muslims are accused of human rights abuses. You don't do it for other people.
Well, that is not true, actually. We report hate crimes of all different religious denominations. On the specific question of blasphemy, the edifice of international law is based on the protection of individuals, not of religions, not of concepts or ideas. And what we do is try and make sure that international law is respected and that blasphemy is not considered as being part of an international human rights standard, because if a government has to decide what is offensive or not, or if a person has the subjectivity to decide what can be defined as being blasphemous, then we are no longer in the realm of international law.
Okay, let me ask the other two guests here. Munia, you here in US fight for Muslims' rights as human rights all the time, and Ms. Jahangir, you in Pakistan fight for human rights. Munir, I'll start with you. Do you feel that Muslims are singled out, as some of these comments suggested, when human rights abuses are done? Or do you think that it's just a perception that some people in the world have?
I think that Muslims are unfairly singled out in the media and by certain prominent policymakers for acts of violence against other people. I think that we don't see equal treatment of other types of violence and terrorism committed by other groups of people. I do think that's true.
And I'll come to you, Joel, but Ms. Jahangir, do you think Muslims are singled out around the world when they commit some kind of human rights abuses as opposed to other groups?
Well, let me say that even in the UN, when I was Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief, we saw that there was much more visibility given when human rights violations were carried out by Muslims, and less visibility, for example, of what happened in India, Orissa, or what happens to the Muslims in Burma or other places of the world. Because religious intolerance, unfortunately, is not confined to Muslim countries alone. But I should add very hastily there that this does not in any event make them feel that they have condoned themselves, because the type of violence that we saw in Nigeria, the type of violence that we see in Pakistan, the type of violence that we see in other parts of the world perpetuated in the name of religion and in the name of Muslim religion, I think we cannot let them get away with the justification that we are the only ones who are pinpointed, because they are not the only ones. The visibility may be more, but then that does not allow you to persecute religious minorities with a self-righteous position. I'm afraid that is unacceptable.
Okay, and Joel, you wanted to add something to this.
Yes, I just wanted to add that I think that the first victims of Pakistan's blasphemy laws are Muslims themselves. And that is something that we also have to bear in mind. I mean, of course, there have been many Christian minorities that have been persecuted through the use of these blasphemy laws. But at the same time, many Muslim Pakistanis are also the victims of these laws. And so that is something that we have to also stress, because we mustn't polarize this discussion of the West versus the East. Of course, there's discrimination against Muslims in the Western world as well. But at the same time, when we're speaking about the specific case of blasphemy, I can give you countless cases. We've reported about 100 cases over 18 countries. And there are specific grave cases in Pakistan where somebody, for example, an illiterate lady throws a business card with the word Muhammad on and is accused of blasphemy. Or, for example, a student who misspells a word about a Quranic verse, which is all of a sudden
and I think Ms.
perceived as
Jahangir
blasphemy
will
as well.
agree with you that Muslims are also, but because she mentioned Burma, I will ask you very briefly to say, because we get a lot of comments saying nobody's talking about Burma, nobody's talking about Burma. You're here representing the human rights community of the world. Are people talking about Burma, particularly the Rohingya Muslims, which recently faced almost killings and at the hands of the government?
Well, we have what we try and do is really stress to the US government how it can use within the leverage of its influence within the framework of its bilateral relations with other countries, how it can fight against religious intolerance. And when I say religious intolerance, it's all forms of religious tolerance. We are indiscriminate towards all the different forms of discrimination that minorities and people of faith around the world suffer from. And nobody is immune.
And the State Department, when I reached out to them, did say that, and they actually have statements on the record that they reached out to the Bangladeshi government, said don't stop aids for the Rohingya Muslims who were trying to flee to Bangladesh, and they also reached out to Burma. But Munia, this is not just an issue of Pakistan or even the Muslim world. US has its own problems. What are some of the challenges your group, the Council on American Islamic Relations, faces day to day in US on this issue?
Unfortunately, especially during the month of Ramadan, the U.S. has experienced a real sharp increase in anti-Muslim attacks, and this is not just hate speech, this crosses a line into actual violence. We saw a mosque in Missouri being burned to the ground after a fourth attempt at doing so by some perpetrator in that community. We saw an Islamic school get acid bombed in Illinois. We saw Islamic gravestones or Muslim gravestones being hit with graffiti. We saw a Eid celebration in Staten Island that was possibly the target of a hate crime when someone scattered bacon near the celebration.
Of the mosque. Now, Ms. Jahangir, you've spent your whole life working on these issues, and we can talk about all the hate crimes that are being committed or not being committed. What I would like to ask you is, and actually what I have in front of me is one of the addresses of the founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, that he made to the Constituent Assembly, in which he said that, you know, Hindus will cease to be Hindus and Muslims will cease to be Muslims, and in the end they'll all be Pakistanis. I want to ask you, is Pakistan moving towards that goal? I know that there are challenges, or is it moving away from it?
Well, unfortunately, Pakistan, like the rest of the world, is moving away from that goal. You see intolerance rising in many parts of the world. My friend has just talked about the Muslim hate speech in the US. This hate speech we found was not only in US but also in the European countries. But what I would very strongly urge is that we look at these violations, not seeing it through the eyes of who is the perpetrator and who is the victim, but what is the nature of this violation and how strong is that violation, how serious it is, and we should deal with issues. Now, there is no doubt in my mind that people from every religious denomination are both perpetrators and victims throughout the world. You can have a look at the UN Special Rapporteur's reports and you will see that this is true. But unfortunately, there are bigoted tendencies and groups also in every society who do it with such self-righteousness, and they do not feel any bit apologetic about what they've done. The answer is that we will do it simply because somebody else is doing it. I think this has to stop.
And so, Ms. Fiss, what I want to find out is, as Ms. Jahangir said, these tendencies are around the world, and even in Pakistan, these tendencies are very strong. How do you fight? And we had some very violent comments, unfortunately, left on our Facebook page asking to kill or burn, or, you know, we don't want to highlight those people. But how do you fight this kind of intolerance and violent tendencies?
Well, what I think is particularly alarming in the case of Pakistan is that the mob violence tends to intimidate the police forces. And so sometimes the crowds are trying to impose their definition of justice onto the law enforcement authorities. And that really doesn't help the situation at all. And so I would advise, I mean, I think it's wonderful that the Pakistani president has called into investigation into this specific case. And I think that that's a very encouraging step forward. But at the same time, the policemen need to be given the means to be able to control the law and order. The rule of law needs to be efficient, and lawyers mustn't be intimidated. Judges mustn't be threatened
and we will come to that, because I see Ms. Jahangir has a lot of experience, and Munia, I will come to you too with some of the issues. But it's all well and good to talk about human rights in abstract, but right now we have a caller with us who, as we understand, was actually in the Ahmadi Mosque in Lahore when it was attacked. Hello, sir. You're online with us. Can you please tell me what your name is?
My name is Ahmed Mustafa.
Ahmed, you were actually in the mosque in Lahore when the attack happened. Can you tell me what happened? What did you feel? What did you see?
Yes, it was about 2 years ago in 2010, and it was just like any other Friday Friday prayers that I went to. And I entered the mosque, and about 10 minutes later, I heard some gunshots. I first thought there were some fireworks, because we used to, some fireworks were exploded almost every other Friday. But initially I thought they were fireworks, but then the gunshots were kept on being fired for about straight 5 minutes. And then it was pretty obvious that, it was some sort of terrorist attack. There were threats indeed against my community, and we had indeed heard of some threats against our mosque as well.
Tell me, Ahmed, what was the first thing that came to your mind the moment you realized it was an attack?
Oh, damn, just hide. No, it was pretty straightforward, because it was I've never experienced anything like this before, and there was there were other people with me too, and first thought on our minds was just to find a place to hide in, because a lot of my relatives were inside the mosque as well, and we just wanted to make sure that everybody was safe.
Okay, thank you very much, Ahmed, for being with us and describing that horrible instance. Ms. Jahangir, Ahmadis are one of the most persecuted communities in Pakistan, but I want to bring the attention back to something that Ms. Fiss said, which is the law enforcement. Because when we reach out to the Pakistani government, they say, yes, we are there's an investigation going on. What are some of the hurdles in this whole instance?
I think the hurdles are numerous. First of all, there is a hesitation by politicians in denouncing the kind of violence that was just described. For example, when the Ahmadi Mosque was attacked, as far as I can recall, no senior official went to condole with the victims or their families. There were, some few statements. Giving that message out that, well, they are fair game by itself is persecution at the state level. Secondly, the police is scared. Not only is the police scared, there are people within the police who may find that killing in the name of religion is fine. I mean, you had an incident in our country that we are ashamed of, where the governor of one of the provinces was shot by a policeman who was supposed to look after him. The crowd and the mob is supported by the clergy, and they are very well organized. These networks are there across the country, and they can create a very serious law and order situation.
Do you think it's going to make a difference that this time the government has actually charged 150 people, according to media reports? Do you think this sends out a message?
I think that there is something even worse here. It's not just religious minorities that are suffering, they are suffering the most. But people who are vulnerable, for example, are suffering violence in our country. For example, just over Eid holidays, one tailor, his head was shaven and his eyebrows because he didn't make the clothes in time for some feudal lord. Another person who was accused of having illicit relations with a woman, his eyes were gouged out, his tongue slit, and his nose cut. I mean, this really tells you something very seriously wrong in a society which has this very perverse sense of violence over vulnerable people. And I am actually very worried about it, and it's not just the police is scared, the police is also sometimes sympathetic. What about lawyers? I mean, I belong to the lawyer community. Many of us are very liberal minded, otherwise they would have never elected me as president. I am a woman there, and my views are very well known. But then there were lawyers who went and greeted the killer of Governor Salman Taseer and showered him with petals. There are lawyers who will intimidate their colleagues if they take up these cases. I myself, when I took these cases up, I was not only threatened, people came to kill me. And they were actually instigated by a couple of lawyers to do it.
To do it. Okay. Now, Ms. Fiss, do you want to add something?
Yes, I would just like to add that I think it's very ironic that those who claim that they are offended by the so-called crime of blasphemy are very often the instigators of violence themselves. And they're the ones who are making the society much less safe for everybody. And so that's what I wanted to add in that respect.
Now, Munia, you also you mentioned some incidents that you deal with here. How does the law enforcement act here? Do you guys feel safe? Do you feel that politicians are standing by you, the government standing by you, or do you face some of the same things that Ms. Jahangir mentioned?
There are some problems in terms of the Muslim community here asserting its rights and being able to protect itself. I think the rubber is really going to hit the road in the coming weeks. To see how law enforcement responds to the community's fears and complaints. And right now there are segments of the community that are scared. Mosques and Islamic institutions have taken the actions of, hiring extra security and so on. But it's, it remains to be seen how this unfolds. There are some politicians who are more supportive. Unfortunately, there are public figures, such as an elected official in Illinois, whose comments about Muslims being out to get other people really coincided with a lot of the anti-Muslim violence. So we'll see what happens.
Now, I want to read out some of the Facebook comments that also came in, and it's very, I don't understand it. You guys work in the human rights community, defenders of human rights. You explain it to me. A lot of people were saying, why are we talking about this one Christian girl? Why are we not talking about drone strikes? Why are we not talking about America attacking Iraq and Afghanistan? And there were multiple people who expressed this views. Ms. Jahangir, I want to find out, what has a young Pakistani-born Pakistani girl to do with drone strikes or any other violations that the U.S. may be carrying out?
These people just talk for the sake of talking. I hear them incessantly talk about the Muslims in Burma, but none of them have ever done anything about it, considering that our government is giving arms to the Burmese Janta. Similarly, they bring in their pet things. We all talk about the violation of Muslims in Srinagar in India, but we don't sort of keep it exclusive to that. What they want us to do is to follow their agenda and keep it exclusive to what they consider is the only human rights violation. No, these are human rights violations, but there are others as well. But I want to explain to people that I live in Pakistan. Now, for me, the life of a Pakistani, the hurt of a Pakistani, I'm sorry to say, I feel it much more than the hurt of an Indian or the hurt of a Bangladeshi or the hurt of an American, because this is my family, this is where I live. And in a family where you live, the people who are more vulnerable, like children, and even amongst them somebody who is a Christian, a country and a nation has to be like a mother. You feel more strongly for them. So why not for this Christian girl? My question is, why not? And I think that when they do not stand up for a child that is so vulnerable in their own society, they are not capable of standing up for any human rights violation except make excuses and intimidate others who talk about human rights violation with commitment.
Now, you just said something that I want to follow up on that, Ms. Jahangir, which is the Pakistani government is providing arms to the Burmese junta. Is that a well-known fact? Do you have something to back it up, or is it... I'm just saying it because I don't have anybody from the Pakistani government here, and it's my job to ask you, how do you...
Let me put it this way, that it has appeared in the newspaper, and similarly the backing of the Indian government for the Burmese is there. And the human rights activists in India have actually called that that kind of support be stopped to the Burmese Janta. And we are also asking our government that we should not give them that kind of support. And towards that, I am happy to say that our Foreign Office and our political leadership has spoken up.
And we will also follow up with the Pakistani government on this. Like I said, since we don't have anybody from the Pakistani government here, we'll follow up on this charge and bring you the news as it happens. Now, there is one more thing. And so basically, there's some comments on Facebook, and there's also a poll that we put up on our website asking what should be done with this 11-year-old little girl, a child by international standards, how she should be treated. And we have the results with us. Let's see if we can look at the results together. Yes, we have them right here. Apparently, 42% of you think that she should be forgiven. About 18% of you think she should be punished. About 25% of you think she should be treated for her mental illness, and 8% of you think she should be given religious freedom. I want to ask all three of you, starting with you, Munia, do these figures look promising, or do you think that there still needs to be work done? And we're right now talking about not just Pakistan, but around the world. But a lot of times we get comments that are really vitriolic, hateful, but we also know that a lot of people who are more in the middle don't leave comments.
Well, I can speak from CARE's perspective that we would hope that people shift more towards more of an attitude of strong tolerance of people from all religious backgrounds, especially where there's been no kind of proof of any crime, especially when you're talking about a developmentally disabled minor. So I would hope that people would more strongly lean towards you know, clemency or letting her go.
Letting her go. Okay. And what do you think about these numbers?
Well, I think that, you know, hate crimes never appear in a vacuum, and we always have to, you know, work on education, work on diversity. Governments have to speak out against hatred. You know, no part of the world is immune to hatred. No religious minority is immune to also being a target. So it's a worldwide challenge that we all have to work on together. But governments can do a lot to reassure communities, to reduce their anxieties, to protect victims, to speak out against hatred, and that would be a great start.
Thank you. And Ms. Jahangir, do you think that these numbers say anything, or do you feel, as a lot of Pakistanis that I've talked to feel, is people give, you know, the right answer in the polls, but when it comes time, they don't get out and speak up in favor of human rights in Pakistan?
I think that these numbers are encouraging, and everybody that I spoke to in the few holidays of Eid, they were quite outraged. And even some of the people from the religious political parties said to me that this is outrageous, this has nothing to do with religion.
And I also want you to expand on something, which is there are allegations that a lot of these blasphemy charges are actually other disputes. Now, your group has worked on that. Can you tell me what other things are allegedly used, blasphemy law used for settling other scores?
Well, it's so many. It's from dispute to access to water tank, it's dispute to land, it's a dispute amongst children. There is just so many. It's so easy to accuse people of blasphemy because it's a victimless crime. So you can accuse people, and because it's such a heinous crime made out in law, that people first get arrested, and even before they're tried, they are already marked people. So I think that conversion laws and blasphemy laws don't help tolerance in societies.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Munia, we see a lot of times in Pakistan that foreign policy has an impact on people's attitudes. When you talk about blasphemy laws, people talk about drone strikes. Do you face something similar here when you talk about Muslim rights? Do you face comments saying, oh, but what about so-and-so country, Muslim country, doing this and this to other people?
We do see that. There are people who are general critics of Muslims or can be critics of governments abroad of Muslim-majority countries who will, point at certain incidents of violence or, unfair treatment that's being meted out by authorities who happen to be Muslims. So an incident like this, the blasphemy issue here, is not exactly helpful in a PR sense for civil rights work for Muslims in America.
Well, thank you very much. Our time is up for this discussion, but this discussion is not over. We will continue on our Facebook page. Please come and leave your comments about this show, about comments that other people have left there. Read them, write about them, continue on this, and also on our Facebook page, urduvoa.com. Tomorrow at the same time, we'll bring you Pakistan on our website. Please tune in for that. I need to thank my guests, Asma Jahangir in the London studios, Munia Jabbar of CARE, and Joëlle Fiss of Human Rights First. You guys raise human rights voices. Please keep raising them. And you guys watch us. Please keep watching. Please coming to our social media pages. Ayesha Tanzeem and all of Access Point team welcomes you and thanks you. And good night for now.
Country, regardless of what we look like, where we come from, who we worship. We are all one people.
Welcome to the VOA studios in Washington. Joining me today to talk about religious intolerance in the 21st century is Munia Jabbar of Council on American Islamic Relations, Joëlle Fiss of Human Rights First, and a very prominent lawyer and human rights activist from Pakistan joining us from our London studios, Asma Jahangir. Welcome to each of you. Now, Ms. Jahangir, I want to start with you. You've spent a lifetime working on human rights in Pakistan. We just talked about the case of a young Christian child being alleged and accused of blasphemy and burning pages of the Quran. This is not an isolated incident, is it?
No, unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. There have been earlier incidents where children have been accused of blasphemy. People who have mentally challenged have been accused of blasphemy, where very old people have been accused of blasphemy. And I think it is about time.
Hello and welcome to your Access Point to Washington. I'm Ayesha Tanzeem. An 11-year-old Christian girl with Down syndrome has allegedly burned pages of a children's book which might have contained verses of the Quran. And police had to take her in custody to save her from an angry mob. While on the other side of the globe, Muslims in Staten Island complained that pieces of bacon were spread on the grounds where they were going to offer their Eid prayers. Is religious tolerance a distant dream even in the 21st century?
Our religion has been termed as an evil religion.
I think the American people...
That we not only get the perpetrators to stand for justice, but there has to be a kind of narration and message in Pakistan which politicians have to give. And this is not a question of left or right. Nobody will stand for that kind of barbarism. It is the kind of barbarism at the eve of Eid where I think no God-fearing person could celebrate Eid. And I hope that at the next Eid, when they are sacrificing a goat, they will sacrifice the beast within.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jahangir. Now, Ms. Fiss, your group, Human Rights First, is one of the groups that raised this concern about this young Christian girl. We have received a lot of comments ever since we announced the topic, and those comments include almost an allegation.
Immediately recoil against those kinds of attitudes.
KKK! The Quran has been equated to Hitler's Mein Kampf.
Radical Muslims are the people that are committing these crimes.
and a Muslim.
It's hurtful when we have our own people, you know, spurring this hate against us.
Because all they see around them, all they feel around them is hate and insecurity.